A finance worker joins a routine video call. His company's chief financial officer is on screen with several colleagues he recognizes. They walk him through an urgent transfer. He sees their faces, he hears their voices, he asks his questions, they answer. So he sends the money. About $25 million. Every single person on that call except him was a fake. Not actors, not a recording. Generated faces and generated voices running live of people who were never there. This actually happened to a real engineering firm and the money was gone. For this whole series we have celebrated what generative AI can make. Paintings out of noise, video out of nothing, a voice out of 3 seconds of sound. This episode is the bill that comes with all of it. When anyone can synthesize a photo, a voice, or a video that never happened, the public hears one big panic. It is actually 3 different fights, and most of the confusion comes from mashing them together. Can we even tell what is real? How do we defend against a convincing fake? And who owns or consented to any of this? Untangling those 3 is the most useful thing we can do here, because the tool that helps with one barely touches the others. Start with the question everyone asks first. Can't we just build a detector, upload any image, any clip, and have a tool say real or fake? It is the obvious wish, and it is the wrong shape for the problem. A pure detector is a guesser. It studies the pixels of a finished file and tries to spot the fingerprints a generator leaves behind. The trouble is structural. The generators improve continuously, everywhere at once, while the detector has to chase each new one. So a detector trained on last year's fakes meets a brand new generator and quietly falls toward a coin flip. And every honest mistake cuts both ways. Call a real photo fake, and you have smeared an innocent person. Call a fake photo real, and you have certified a lie. A guesser that is confidently wrong on a question this important is worse than no answer at all. That is why the serious work moved away from guessing after the fact, toward proving provenance from the start. Provenance just means the origin and history of a file. Where it came from, what made it, what happened to it since. Instead of squinting at a finished image hoping to spot the seams, you attach trustworthy information at the moment of creation and carry it forward. There are 2 main ways to do that, and the key thing up front is that they are not the same, and neither one is a magic answer. The first way is a receipt. It has a name you will start seeing everywhere: content credentials built on an open standard called C2PA. Think of it as a nutrition label that rides along with a file. When an image is made or edited by a tool that supports it, a small signed record is attached, captured on this camera or generated by this model on this date, then cropped here. Crucially, this is cryptography, not AI. The record is digitally signed, so if anyone tampers with the picture, the seal breaks and you can tell. It is tamper-evident and adoption is real now. Camera makers, mainstream editing software, big platforms, and the major labs are attaching these credentials, increasingly by default. But here is the catch, because it is the whole reason a receipt alone cannot save us. The label is metadata, extra information bundled around the file, and metadata is fragile. Take a screenshot of a labeled image, and the screenshot has no label. Upload it to almost any social platform and the recompression quietly strips the record on the way in. The picture survives, its history does not. And there is a deeper asymmetry people get backwards constantly. A present credential can show something was AI made or edited, but an absent one proves nothing, because a genuine photo from an old camera never had a label to begin with. No receipt does not mean real. It just means no receipt. One more humbling point. A perfectly valid, untampered credential can sit on a completely fake image if whatever signed it chose to lie. This is not hypothetical. A flaw found in one camera maker's recent model let attackers mint genuinely valid signatures on faked photos until the keys were revoked. A live reminder that the signature proves a record is intact, not that the picture is real. Provenance tells you the record is intact and who signed it. It does not by itself tell you the content is true. So the receipt rides on the outside, and the outside is where things get rubbed off. The second way fixes that weakness by hiding the signal on the inside. It is called an invisible watermark, and Google's version, SynthID, is the one to know. Instead of bolting a label onto the file, the model weaves a faint, structured pattern directly into the pixels of an image, the waveform of audio, even the word choices of text, at the moment it generates them. For text, the trick is genuinely clever. The model has to pick each next word from many plausible options anyway, so it quietly nudges those choices toward a secret pattern a matching detector can later read back. To your eye and ear, nothing changes. Because the mark lives in the content itself, it survives the things that destroy a receipt. Crop the image, compress it, screenshot it, and the watermark usually rides along. By the maker's own counts, more than 10 billion pieces of media had already been marked this way by sometime in 2026, though treat that as a vendor figure, not an audit. Now the honest part, because this is where it is easy to overpromise. The watermark is trained to be stubborn. Removing it is designed to also visibly damage the content, so an attacker must choose between a clean file and a clean removal. But trained to resist is not unbreakable. Researchers have published attacks that strip these marks a large fraction of the time. The makers dispute the exact rate, and for text, a simple paraphrase can wash the watermark out entirely. It raises the cost of faking. It does not make faking impossible, and the deepest limit, it only marks content from systems that chose to mark. A bad actor running their own open model emits nothing, which is most of the tools out there. A watermark is a speed bump and an audit trail, never a fence. So now we have 3 imperfect tools, and the right move is to stop hunting for the perfect one and stack them. They fail in different ways, which is exactly why you want all 3. The receipt carries rich history but is easily stripped. The watermark carries almost no detail but clings to the content through abuse. And forensic detection, the original guesser, is the only layer that works at all on content from a generator that refused to cooperate, left no receipt and no watermark, just with that permanent arms race asterisk. Strip the receipt, and the watermark may still whisper this was machine-made. Defeat the watermark, and an intact receipt may still show the chain of edits. That is why, by 2026, the major labs stopped treating these as rivals and started shipping them together. Images from the big assistants now leave the factory with both a signed credential on the outside and an invisible watermark on the inside, and public tools are appearing that check for both at once. This posture has a name worth keeping: defense in depth. Not one perfect wall, but several imperfect ones, so getting past all of them at once is hard. Notice this is the same instinct we used against a very different attacker in another series, when we hardened a language model against prompt injection. There the threat was poisoned text steering a model's actions. Here it is synthetic media steering a human's belief. Different surface, same lesson. Do not trust one wall. And even at its best, this whole stack only answers the first of our 3 questions. It might tell you something is synthetic. It does nothing to stop someone using a synthetic version of you against the people who trust you. Which brings us back to that video call. Let's be clear about the frame we are using because it is the only responsible one. We are standing entirely on the defender's side. The goal is to understand the threat well enough to protect people from it, never to teach anyone how to build one. And there is a bright line under all of it: consent. Making a synthetic version of a real person's face or voice without their permission to deceive someone is the harm. This channel will never do it, and the law, as we will see, is moving to forbid it. Now the uncomfortable truth a defender has to accept: you cannot win this by looking harder. For years the advice was, watch for the tells. Stiff blinking, a robotic voice, weird lighting around the edges. Every one of those tells has been disappearing on a schedule. The voices that sounded like a kazoo a few years ago are now warm and natural. In careful tests, people shown high-quality fake videos guess correctly only about a quarter of the time, worse than a coin flip, because the confident fakes fool us in a consistent direction. and a usable clone of a voice now takes seconds of audio, about the length of a voicemail greeting. So if your defense is a human squinting at a screen, deciding does this feel real, you have already lost. And notice the trap in any rule that says you can spot a fake by some specific flaw. Those rules expire. The durable statement is the honest one. A face and a voice are no longer evidence of who you are actually talking to. So if you cannot trust your eyes, what do you trust? The answer is almost boringly old-fashioned, and that is exactly why it works. You move the proof out of the content and into the process. Think about what the deepfake actually attacked. It did not break any encryption. It exploited one human habit. We believe a familiar face and an urgent voice, and we act before we verify. So you defend the habit, not the pixels. The single most effective move is out-of-band verification. The request arrives on one channel, the video call, the email, the voice message. You confirm it on a completely different channel the attacker does not control. You hang up and call back on the known, saved number. A fake face on a screen cannot answer a phone you dialed yourself. Layer on the unglamorous classics. A pre-agreed code word for anything sensitive that no synthetic voice would know. A mandatory pause and a second approver for large or unusual transfers, because urgency is the attacker's main weapon and a built-in delay disarms it. None of this is clever. All of it is structural. And that is the deepest lesson of this whole section, and it rhymes with the provenance stack. Against synthetic media, you do not win by detecting the fake. You win by building a process where being fooled by the fake is not enough to cause harm. The content can lie. The procedure does not have to. Now the third door, and it is the messiest, because it is mostly not a technology problem at all. It is a legal and a human one, and it is genuinely unsettled. When people argue about AI and copyright, they are usually blurring four separate questions together, and the shouting comes from treating them as one. Pull them apart and it gets much clearer. Question 1. Was it even legal to train the model on all that copyrighted work in the first place? Question 2. When the model produces an output, does that specific output copy someone's protected work? Question 3. Who, if anyone, owns what the AI makes? And question 4, less about courts and more about fairness. Even where training is allowed, did the people whose life's work was used get any say or any pay? These have different answers, fought in different courtrooms and bargaining tables, and they depend on where in the world you are standing. So let's take them honestly, without pretending the fight is over, because it very much is not. Question 1, training, gave us the most instructive ruling so far. One major AI company was sued by authors for training on their books. A judge found that the act of learning from those books, extracting patterns to build something new, was, in his words, exceedingly transformative, a fair use. That sounds like a clean win for the labs. But the same company still agreed to pay around $1.5 billion, the largest copyright settlement of its kind. Why? Because of how it got the books. It had downloaded huge numbers of them from pirate libraries. And that, the piracy of the source material, was the liability, not the learning. Read that twice, because it is the whole subtlety. Training on data you lawfully hold may be fair use, while obtaining that data illegally is its own separate wrong, with its own enormous bill. It is just one ruling in one country, not even final, with the approval and payouts to hundreds of thousands of authors still being worked through. And there is a live escape hatch the labs are nervous about. In another case, a court accepted fair use only because the authors failed to prove market dilution. The idea that a flood of cheap AI substitutes can harm the market for the originals. The judge hinted a stronger record might have flipped it, and an appeals court could still rewrite all of this. Question 2 is completely separate. When a model produces an output, does that output copy someone's work? Usually it generates something genuinely new, a blend of millions of examples, and that is fine. But it can reproduce a near copy of something it saw many times, a famous photo, a recognizable cartoon character, a logo, and that output can infringe exactly the way a human copying it would. This is why some of the sharpest lawsuits are not about training at all, but about outputs. Major studios have sued image generators for producing pictures of their trademarked characters. The same tool can be fine on one prompt and a problem on the next. And question 3, ownership. Copyright has long been built around human authorship, so in several places an image generated purely by typing a prompt, with no meaningful human control, cannot be copyrighted by anyone and can fall into a gap where it belongs to no one. Add substantial human craft, and that changes, and other countries draw the line differently. The honest summary is the same across all of it. A live, shifting frontier decided case by case, where anyone who hands you a confident one-line answer is selling something. Now question 4, the one that gets the least airtime and matters most to actual people. Set the courtrooms aside for a second. Behind every training set is a person whose work is in it. A novelist, a photographer, a session musician, an illustrator, a voice actor. Their fight is not really lawyer-shaped. It is about consent and compensation. And there is a precise distinction here the industry often blurs on purpose. The common offer from AI companies is opt-out. Your work is used to train by default, and you may, if you find the right form, ask to be removed. But opt-out is not consent. Most material was already trained on before any opt-out existed, and asking to leave does not undo what already happened. The standard the creative unions and many artists are fighting for is the opposite, opt-in plus pay. Nothing of mine is used unless I agree first, and I am compensated when it is. This is where actors and musicians have drawn the hardest line, especially around their own face and voice, the most personal data there is, and it runs deeper than the raw training set. Remember the preference pass we keep coming back to, the one that turned a raw text predictor into a helpful assistant and later tuned image models toward the picture people prefer. The humans doing all that comparing are workers too. Alignment is a long chain of human judgment, and consent belongs at every link of it, not just the first. Some of this is moving from protest into contracts. Performer unions have negotiated terms requiring informed consent and payment before anyone makes a digital replica of a performer's voice or likeness. And notice this is not something a watermark or a clever algorithm can fix. No architecture decides whether an artist gets paid. That is licensing, bargaining, and law. Which is exactly why the last piece of this puzzle is not a tool at all. It is a rule. Underneath all of these fights, something bigger is shifting. For years, this was a free-for-all, where the only rules were whatever the tools happened to allow. That era is ending, and it is arriving on a calendar. One major economic bloc has passed a sweeping AI law, and its transparency rules are landing right around now. The principle is simple, and it ties this whole episode together. If you make or deploy synthetic media, you have to say so. The companies building the systems must mark their outputs in a machine-readable way, the exact receipts and watermarks we spent the first half of this episode on, so that detection is even possible. And anyone deploying a deepfake, a piece of media made to look or sound like a real person or event, must disclose that it is artificial, even with no intent to deceive. Regulators are even working toward a single common label, a shared icon, so an ordinary viewer could recognize AI content the way you recognize a recycling symbol. Now the honest caveats, because this is exactly the kind of fact that goes stale fast. This is one jurisdiction, not the whole planet. There are narrow carve-outs for obvious art and satire. And the precise timing has been a moving target. The deadline to disclose deepfakes is set for the middle of 2026, while the deeper duty to watermark every generated output was already nudged a few months later to give companies time to build it, with the exact technical standards still being finalized as this was written. So hold the direction firmly and the dates loosely. The point is not the specific deadline. The point is that disclosure is shifting from a nice idea into a legal duty, And because the companies building these tools are global, once one large market demands a label, it is often easier to label everywhere than to run two versions of the world. The voluntary phase is closing. Step back. We learned across this series that generation is just a model walking noise toward the thing you described in pixels, in sound, in motion. That power is real and it is not going back in the box. This was the episode about living with it. And the shape of the answer is the opposite of what most people hope for. There is no single magic detector, no one wall that makes everything safe. There is a stack of imperfect, overlapping defenses, and using them together is the whole strategy. Provenance, the receipt and the watermark and the leftover forensic guess, lets us start labeling what is synthetic, as long as we never forget that none of them is a lie detector, and an adversary can refuse to play. Process, the callback and the code word and the deliberate pause, protects us where our own eyes and ears no longer can. Consent and law, arriving now with real dates attached, are turning the best of these habits from a nice idea into a duty, and trying to make sure the people whose work built all this get a say. None alone is sufficient. All of them together is how a society keeps its footing when seeing is no longer believing. And here is the part that does not need a lab or a lawyer. The most important shift is not a tool you install. It is a reflex you build. When something arrives that wants you to feel and act right now, a face, a voice, an outrage, an urgent transfer, the new literacy is one calm question. How do I actually know this is real? Asking it every single time is the defense.